It's challenging trying to do that and repeat it. Like we have to do fire drills every month. So every month we have to put all of our learners into it. And sometimes they just don't want to go. And in a real life situation, that wouldn't be an option. So it's good that we're practicing it and slowly, okay, maybe you don't want to go to the meeting point. Let's get just outside at the front door, or let's just get in the hallway and just like slowly build up to that. And because we don't want to make it aversive for them. We want them to be able to follow through the instructions, because in the event of a real fire, then everything is going to be really overwhelming. So we want them to have that practice and knowledge of, okay, these are the steps that I need to do, being fluent with it and being able to follow through with that process.
Mississauga Fire actually referred us to Caledon Fire, which is a neighboring city next to Mississauga. It's part of the same region. And we actually had an opportunity to meet with some of their team members to specifically support exactly what you're talking about, understanding the neurodiverse population. So understanding what are some of the things that you might see in an emergency situation. For example, communication shutdown, not responding to instructions. And then we talked about ways to approach those situations from a neurodiversity affirming lens, because I think these were all fire safety leads that were going to bring this information back to their respective stations. And so we got a lot of questions about providing support to an individual who didn't communicate, had a lot of difficulty evacuating the situation. So I think a lot of these firefighters and first responders have been in these situations and don't necessarily have the tools to be able to support. So having those discussions is really valuable.
I'd like to take a moment to explain an important update to how you earn continuing education units through Behaviour Speak. If you've earned CEUs with us before, you might remember listening for secret words throughout the episode. Under the Behaviour Analyst Certification Board's updated ACE provider requirements, that process has changed. Podcasts remain an approved way to earn CEUs. However, instead of verifying participation through embedded code words, we are now required to use knowledge-based questions to evaluate engagement with the learning event. That's where the Behaviour Speak knowledge check comes in. Here's how it works. First, listen to the entire episode. Once you finish listening, head over to behaviorspeak.com and open the show notes for this episode. There, you'll find the Behaviour Speak Knowledge Check, a series of multiple-choice questions based on the episode's key learning points. Next, click on the CEUs tab at the top of the website and select the CEU for this episode. As part of the purchase process, you'll enter the letter corresponding to the correct answer for each question in the knowledge check. After successfully completing the knowledge check and the remaining CE requirements, you'll receive your CE certificate just as before. The knowledge check isn't meant to be a test to catch you out. Instead, it's designed to reinforce the key concepts from the conversation and encourage reflection on how they apply to your own behavior analytic practice. While the process has changed, our mission hasn't. Behaviour Speak remains committed to bringing you thoughtful conversations with leading clinicians, researchers, educators, advocates, and people with lived experience from around the world. We hope these conversations continue to challenge your thinking, broaden your perspective, and strengthen your practice. Thank you for choosing Behaviour Speak as part of your continuing education journey. Now let's get to today's episode. I'm Ben Reiman, and this is Behaviour Speak. Welcome back to Behaviour Speak. I'm your host, Ben Reiman. Today's episode explores a topic that rarely gets enough attention in behavioral programming, but has the potential to save lives: fire safety. Joining me are Sarah Elkami Trdina, Lina Pezzo Szodo, and Camila Grullon from Always Connected Treatment Network, a multidisciplinary organization serving children, youth, and young adults with diverse learning needs across the Greater Hamilton and Greater Toronto areas. Together, they share their journey from clinical behavior analysis into community-based fire safety education and public outreach. What began as a chance meeting with public educators from Mississauga Fire evolved into an innovative cross-sector partnership focused on improving fire safety outcomes for neurodivergent individuals and their families. The team discusses caregiver workshops, smoke alarm desensitization, fire drill training, emergency preparedness, and the development of accessible resources that bridge the gap between fire prevention and behavior analytic practice. We also explore how behavior analysts can can collaborate with professionals outside our field, why emergency preparedness deserves greater attention in treatment planning, and what happens when organizations step outside their traditional silos to solve real-world problems together. Whether you're a behavior analyst, educator, emergency responder, caregiver, or someone interested in building safer and more inclusive communities, this conversation is packed with practical ideas and inspiration. Here's my conversation with Sarah, Lina, and Camila. Ready to Behaviour Speak.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having us.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, stoked to get into this. So let's get started by just learning a little bit about the three of you, where you're all from, where you work, and a little bit about that.
My name's Sarah Elkami Trdina. I am a board-certified behavior analyst and registered behavior analyst in Ontario. I'm one of the co-founders and executive directors at Always Connected Treatment Network. We're a therapeutic hub of services that supports children, youth, and young adults with diverse learning needs in the Greater Hamilton and Greater Toronto area. I'm based in Hamilton, but we've been operating since 2015.
Camila, how about you?
Yeah, I also work at Always Connected Treatment Network. I work there as a case manager, senior therapist. I am a registered behavior analyst here in Ontario, and I graduated recently from Brock University from my Master's of Applied Disability Studies.
Right on. Lina?
Hello. Lina Pezzo Szodo here. I'm also a registered behavior analyst. I'm also one of the co-founders and directors at Always Connected Treatment Network. We're excited to be here today. I think Sarah covered a lot of the stuff that I was going to say, which is nice. Our passions, I think, in relation to what we're talking about today is bridging some of the gaps between research and real-world application, which we're going to dive into. So I'm excited about that.
Nice. And so why don't you tell me a little bit about why you started Always Connected in the first place, what the mission is, a little bit more about the company, the history.
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you for asking. Sarah and I met a long time ago where we were practicing ABA. We were still getting our feet wet with the actual clinical side. So we ended up going to school together and became BCABAs and later did our master's and became BCBAs. There was lots of wonderful organizations around us, but we certainly saw the gap between bridging a variety of services together. So families were going to different service providers and trying to navigate a very complex world on their own. So Sarah and I thought that we could create a hub of services. It primarily started in ABA and has grown to different service renderings that we offer, but mainly for families to just have a landing point where they can meet a group of individuals that can help guide the journey perhaps it's from a diagnosis, perhaps it's from I'm seeing some red flags as a parent and I'd like some guidance. Perhaps it's I'm trying to access service, but this is very complicated. I'd like some support. And then moving into how we can support on a clinical basis. So the dream formulated from looking at what families truly needed and maybe what was missing within our community. Sarah, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think you captured that really well. One thing that I think attracted Lina and I to each other was a passion for creating a sense of community. And that's one of our pillars of the organization is community outreach, which is why this project really feels like home for us because it allows us to get in touch with the community and apply our clinical work with other organizations who have similar values of filling in those gaps for the community, disseminating information. And so we have always been really focused on creating community opportunities where we can meet these families outside of the clinical setting and understand their real life experiences. What are the things that happen in their life outside of the clinic? And I think it has allowed us to have a more well-rounded approach as clinicians. And it's something that we are very passionate and very excited to do on a continuous basis.
Right on. What sort of, maybe kind of going back even further, Sarah, what was your sort of story for getting into the field in the first place?
I think Lina has a similar story that the field kind of fell into our lap. So I know for myself, I always enjoyed working with children and I was studying psychology in my undergrad. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with that, but I knew that I was taking on a lot of roles that were working with children. And I ended up working in a recreational therapy center with children, youth, and young adults. And that was my first experience working with individuals with disabilities, autism. I had never had any experience up until that point or any knowledge of what ABA was. So it was really eye-opening for me and I really enjoyed it. So that kind of led me to my next stage where I was working in group homes, working with adults. And then I actually remember graduating university. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I cold called a bunch of ABA agencies because I was like, this is cool. I think I want to try this. I ended up calling an agency where Lina was already working and got some part-time hours, and I met Lina very quickly. She was such a welcoming face, and that's how we met, and that's how we continued to pursue the field. And I think we were there for only a couple months before we both were like, let's do this. Let's continue our education. This is exciting. And the rest is history. That's how it all started.
And what about you, Lina?
Similar path, but I was determined that I was going to be, I'm going to be a teacher. And then I'm going to work my way up through the system and I'm going to get into administration. And one day I'm going to be a principal. I had my eyes set on that. And I graduated teachers college and it just didn't sit right with me, mainly because when I was in teachers college and I did the concurrent education program. So I was there in teachers college for a number of years versus the consecutive at the time was only a year. And I was actually looking for more understanding of what they then called special education. So working with neurodivergent individuals. And there was only one elective course on it, which obviously I took. And then I graduated and I thought, the people that didn't take those programs, I don't know how confident they are with working with neurodivergent individuals, which was always a passion of mine. So in moving forward, I really tried to look at my options. My sister-in-law, shout out to Jenny, she was actually working at the same organization that Sarah and I met. So she was saying, why don't you come and try this, which is where I landed. And like Sarah said, the rest is history.
So Camila, I want to hear a bit about your story. Yours is a little different. You started in the Dominican Republic, and I think I've only had one guest on the podcast from the DR a while back. Tell me a little bit about sort of your origin story, kind of how you got into things, and starting back at Treehouse and maybe even before that.
Yeah, so I started working during my undergraduate at a preschool, and the job that I got was what they called before a shadow teacher, which was basically a assistant therapist. So the BCBA would tell me what to do, what programs to run within the school environment, and then I would do that during the school time with the client that I was assigned to. And that was sort of my first experience with ABA and people with disabilities being directly involved in it. And so I really just fell in love with it. That was my first time. And then I just said, like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so, like, every job that I got afterwards, I got another job as a shadow teacher for a teenager. Then I went to doing ABA sessions in the clinical setting. I got my RBT certification, which is the Registered Behavior Technician. And after that, in the Dominican, there wasn't any master's program to be a BCBA. And I knew there wasn't a lot of growth on that area for me, because I know my BCBA supervisor did her master's in Florida and other people had to do it outside of the country. So that's when I decided to come to Canada with my husband just to pursue that further education and be able to continue doing what I love and be able to certify myself to give that further support rather than giving the direct sessions, to be more in a clinical administration side. And that's also how I landed here at Always Connected. I was looking for a way to make more meaningful changes in my community and be involved in more areas that I can grow at. I was working first at in Hamilton, and the Always Connected was in Mississauga. So I wanted to take that chance to challenge myself and commute a bit further from my house and do some home sessions, look at new people, new opportunities. And so far it's been amazing. I'm really happy to be able to connect with the community through Always Connected.
Oh, right on. Brock's quite the leap. I mean, a lot of folks in sort of Central South America do end up going to school in Florida or Texas. Why the leap all the way to chilly Canada?
Yeah, no, fair enough. Actually, my husband studied here in Canada. He did an exchange student program in what was it? British Columbia.
That's where I am.
So
Yeah.
he went there, and we wanted to go somewhere that I could get my BCBA at. So the options at the moment were US, Canada, or Australia. And he said, let's go to Canada, since he was already familiar with somewhat the things around there. And we've always wanted to go and visit another country and live somewhere else as well. And so we came here. We saw all the BCBA masters that were available in Canada. And then Brock was the one that called out to me the most. And so we decided to just come here.
Amazing. And are you originally from the Dominican Republic?
Yeah, I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic until I was 22. That's when I moved here to Canada. And now I'm 26.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so you haven't been here that long. And so do you have, I always have an interest in behavior analysis in other countries. And and I always like to hear from folks that have, come to Canada. I had a supervisee, and she's BCBA now. And in fact, she's Natalia. She's a few of the Spanish episodes that we've had on the podcast. And she's always had aspirations. She's from Colombia, and she's always had aspirations to bring ABA and PBS back to Colombia. Do you ever have any of those kinds of sort of goals around sort of bringing stuff back home, knowing there's not a lot going on there?
Yeah, definitely. I still connect a lot with my previous BCBA supervisor and my other coworkers. Recently, the Dominican Republic has now a master's for ABA, and two of my ex-coworkers are doing it, and we're connecting and we're trying to collaborate with each other. My BCBA supervisor is trying to tell me to go and give some classes at the university in the Dominican Republic, but I'll think about it when I'm less busy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, because they're doing the program virtual, so it's a good way to connect. But definitely I want to get all the resources that we're working here at Always Connected and the things that I've learned here in Canada to get them to the Dominican and be able to give them some support, as I'm not sure if you know that the Dominican Republic is not as advanced in the accessibility aspect as compared to Canada. So we're still getting there. So I think they will really benefit from a lot of the resources that we have here and the information and just like the knowledge and ability to apply those in their daily life.
Yeah. And do you know if folks down there have connected at all with the Caribbean ABA group?
What do you mean?
So there's a Caribbean Association for Behavior Analysis. Were you familiar with that?
No,
okay.
Not really.
We'll talk more. So check it out. I actually did an interview with the founders a couple of years ago. They had their first conference. I think it was in Jamaica this year. But yeah, they've got members from most of the Caribbean islands, and I'm sure they'd love to have some representation from the DR. So
I'll connect with my ex-BCBA supervisor because she's the president of ABA Dominican Republic.
Perfect.
So I think she'll be thrilled to know that there's an ABA part in the Caribbean in general.
Absolutely.
So that'll be great.
They started a couple of years ago, and I think it's been really good for folks. I recently did release an interview with Maxia Rigby Williams, and she's like the only behavior analyst in Turks and Caicos, and so she's really talked about how having this regional group has been really supportive when she's so alone sort of on those islands, and I'm sure it's probably a similar situation for some of your folks. Yeah. Well,
that'll be awesome.
Yeah, we should connect after, because I really want to get an episode on behavior analysis in the DR, so maybe we can collaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a small group where there's only 10 behavior analysts in the whole country.
Wow.
And that's like thinking of the recent graduates that might be getting it. But the last time when I was there doing my supervision hours, there were only like 5.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a need to talk more and connect and see that more people want to do ABA in the Dominican.
Amazing. Right on. Okay, so let's get into some of the current things. So how did you sort of get involved with more of this public education side of things? That seems a little separate from your traditional sort of ABA model. Tell me a little bit about how that all started.
I can share how we met the teams. We were invited to a community barbecue in 2024, summer of 2024. And we met the public education team from Mississauga Fire, which is the local fire department. They're one of the biggest public education teams in Ontario. When we met Emily and Esther, we thought they were firefighters. So we were just chatting with them and it was actually funny because that event took place on a rooftop patio, and the organization was a adult day program. So they actually had a lot of individuals who were in wheelchairs. And during the event, the elevators broke down and they were like, "Hey, Emily and Esther, you guys can fix the elevator." They're like, "No, we can't. We're not firefighters. That's not what we do. You guys need to call the actual department." But it was great. Like, it was a really nice opportunity for us to talk about what they do in the public education sector. And we basically said, after this, let's set up a time to connect. And what I loved about Emily and Esther was that they wanted to follow up, and we did have that follow up very shortly after. And they were very passionate about learning more about what we do, individuals we serve. So we had chatted about creating an opportunity to educate caregivers on fire safety prevention in the home. So that was our real first project working with the team. And so in March of 2025, we developed a virtual caregiver workshop. It was free, and we collaborated on different areas. So the Mississauga Fire team focused on safety prevention. So what are the actual recommendations from the fire safety lens in terms of smoke alarms, how to prevent kitchen fires? And then we offered some approaches to teaching fire safety skills. So the nice thing about that is we did some preliminary work, and we put out a survey for caregivers on the importance of fire safety. And that was really eye-opening for us because we saw that it was such an important skill from what families report, but most of them weren't prioritizing it. And I think that's sort of a trend of what we see with just general parents focusing on fire safety, is because it's not something that comes up in the day-to-day. It's a set of skills that gets put on the back burner. But what we know from our research is that individuals with diverse learning needs are at higher risk for being able to follow through with fire safety drills or real fire safety emergencies. So there's even more importance for us to be able to work on these skills out of context to prepare them for potentially real world context. So that was our first experience with them. And then Lina and Camila, you guys can share more information on the symposium that you guys participated in.
Like, how did you find these folks and make that connection?
Yeah, so these were mostly families within our network. We sent out a notice on our newsletters to other community partners to share information about the opportunity. And so we had a wide range of ages of children that parents were responding for, some young children, some older children. That was our main network. I know Mississauga Fire also sent out information on their networks as well, but majority was from our internal network. It was a free workshop. Anyone could sign up, and we wanted it to be something that was accessible, which is also why we chose to do it online, because we wanted that to be something that parents could attend. And we didn't want to narrow in on, for example, autistic individuals. We wanted to be neurodiverse children and youth so that more people could attend the session.
And so tell me a bit about your BCBA. So tell me about sort of the behavior analytic piece and all this. You're doing fire safety training, so I can imagine there's probably some BST in here. But tell me a little bit about how this is a role for you folks and not the fire departments to do.
Yeah, so it was really us trying to highlight why this is important. So one thing that we talked about was how a lot of these big skills, like for example, fire evacuation, require a lot of smaller skills when it comes to communication, gross motor skills, responding to instructions. We tried to highlight how these big skills actually require a lot of prerequisite skills. And that was really helpful for the Mississauga Fire team to understand, because when they are going into schools, for example, or they're going into settings where they're providing this public education, it's usually just a one-time opportunity where they're speaking and they don't know necessarily all the individual children's learning styles or, their communication needs. So it's a very general type of learning opportunities. So what we were trying to highlight is these are the preventative strategies that Mississauga Fire has highlighted as important. If we're looking at this from an ABA lens, this is how you might be able to teach these skills depending on your individual child's prompts, preference, based on your home setting, what it looks like, based on your everyday environments. So some examples that we talked about were social stories or a desensitization protocol for responding to a fire smoke alarm. So one thing that Emily and Esther had shared with us, which was really valuable, was that they have noticed a lot of families actually turn off their smoke alarms because of those false alarms and don't remember to put it back on. And so that's obviously a risk. So we talked about the importance of teaching that and how that could be taught depending on, that individual, where they are in that, where they might fit into the desensitization process, right? You might not have to carry it over 8 steps. It might be 4 steps, for example. So we tried to provide general ABA strategies and not necessarily went into how they would teach them and do that on an individual level. And that's something that we hope to do in the future. And Camila can actually share, because I know that she's worked on that individually with one of our clients. But we wanted it to be something where we could disseminate how the ABA field and public education could come together for this cross collaboration on sharing important information.
I did want to highlight that this did start with supporting our community, but then we were asked by Mississauga Fire to actually be part of a presentation for their community a few months later in May of 2025. So we were invited to host a seminar discussion at the OMF POA. We finally got the acronym. So the Ontario Municipal Fire Prevention Officers Association. And the people we spoke to, Camila, if my memory serves me right, I think there was about 100 to 150 people in the room at that particular seminar. And there was anything from fire prevention officers, public educators, fire investigators, plan examiners, and fire chiefs in the room. So that was a really great opportunity for us to take the information that we've provided and provide it to a group of people that are directly connected to the community. Like Sarah said, it wasn't meant for us to necessarily teach ABA or how we would implement these skills, but some resources that they could use. So we actually created, in collaboration with Mississauga Fire, a wonderful resource. And our call to action to the community that was in there was to take this resource and just share it. So it was simply a link that brought you to the presentation that we provided that day. It had different resources that we had made, from desensitization guides. We had visual aids in there. I'm sure the rest of them can join in, but our social stories were also in there. So it was as simple as saying, here's a guide, we created it for you, go out and use it. So it was nice that we were able to take the content that we used for our community and then place it into the hands of those that could really spread it wider.
One thing I want to add is what we appreciated was when Mississauga Fire's marketing team was developing some of these visuals, they came back to us and they asked us for input. So one example is they had a visual of where someone should stand when the stove is on. And so they had a very abstract photo representing 3 feet. And we had given a recommendation to say, this might be a little bit too arbitrary for some individuals. Why don't you try something like this? One other suggestion we had was grouping together the different concepts based on colors. So if you're focusing on smoke detection, let's make all of these visuals like blue border. And let's make all the visuals related to kitchen safety red. So it helps the skills that maybe these individuals are working on. So that small area of collaboration could help support learning in a small way, but has a big impact.
Yeah. So you mentioned a follow-up symposium. Tell me a bit about that.
Esther and Emily developed some things in collaboration with us so that it wasn't just like us ABA people telling you what to do just because. And it was more like, look at what we've done together to get some strategies for the community.
Yeah, I think outcome that we were trying to establish was that push towards cross-sector collaboration. So encouraging these other fire sectors to maybe get in touch with ABA agencies in their own communities, or to try to utilize the resources we have with a local school that they know has a population with neurodiverse children. And so it wasn't like a one size fits all. It was really just sort of this encouragement of use this idea and then you take it and you customize it based on your community. And that's similar to what our goal was with ONTABA as well, was to help highlight how we focused on cross-sector collaboration and some of the steps that we followed to ensure that we were aligned in our project. Can I speak a little bit more about ONTABA?
Please do, yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that we highlighted was a framework that other behavior analysts can use to start that cross-sector collaboration. So the first step being learning about what this other organization that you want to collaborate with does. Like what exactly do they do? What's the target population that they're serving? And then learning more about what does it actually look like in the day-to-day within their projects? What are the constraints they have? What are the resources they have? So it's really learning about the organization and their vision, and then seeing if there's alignment with what project you're working on and what that vision is as well. And that was really easy with us in Mississauga Fire. I think from the get-go, we really saw ways that we could complement each other. And then obviously during ONTABA, we talked a bit more about the actual project we did with Mississauga Fire as well.
It was, it's been a beautiful flow, to be honest, this project, because it started with supporting our community, trying to get this resource out cross-sector to other people that could potentially benefit from this information, and then ending up at ONTABA, where we're just taking the successful framework that we used to collaborate with, again, cross-sector professionals that aren't in the ABA field, and is the framework that would allow you to take whatever you're passionate about and find the people in that particular field and work together to create valuable resources.
And it was great to see people that were also interested when we were talking about it in ONTABA. So it was great to see a lot of faces listening to us and feel really interested in knowing more about this topic and how they can also implement it in their practices.
And so what's been the response and the feedback from I'll have a go at this, the OM FPOA in terms of, so you did that last year. Are they looking for more training, more support? What's next?
It was actually interesting because Emily and Esther had said, we don't need to leave a ton of time at the end of our presentation. There isn't typically a ton of dialogue at the end of a seminar. And we should have left more time, actually, because there was tons of questions that came in, which is great. And even after the fact, because we had to wrap it up because they had other things that they were discussing, we had lots of people come up interested in getting more information. A lot of discussions around, this directly impacts me because I know someone that identifies as neurodivergent, or this is a great resource that I can take into this environment that I'm supporting. So great dialogue came from there. Esther and Emily have expressed interest in continuing our partnership. So we do have some plans currently in the work. Specifically right now in Peel Region, there should be anyways, later in the year, some additional resources that are coming out and presentations for the community. So we hope it's an endless project because we really love what we're doing and we're loving that we're spreading this awareness, and we love working with this organization who's incredibly passionate about fire safety and understands the importance of bringing that fire safety into our world, into that neurodivergent world, in a way that is accessible to individuals.
So Esther and Emily, are they connected with the Mississauga group or with the provincial group?
Mm-hmm. They're connected to Mississauga Fire. They're public educators. And if memory serves me correctly, Mississauga Fire is the largest public education fire safety team in all of Ontario. They have the largest number of public education officers. So it's neat to be working with such a large group. We specifically work with Esther and Emily, but they work with a large, obviously, population. So it allows us to connect with a larger audience.
And has there been any thought or requests for training more because I think certainly things like smoke alarms and all those things are really important in terms of and evacuation skills and fire drills, and I think that's an issue not just in homes but certainly in schools. Fire drills in schools are always a struggle for folks. Has there been any But I also know that there's a lot of concerns around for the firefighters themselves and first responders and whatnot supporting neurodivergent individuals, because there's a lot of unknowns that kind of happen in there, and a lack of structure and a lot of super loud noises and all those sorts of things kind of associated. Lots of invasion of space and all those sorts of things. Have there been discussions or interest in training for the first responders themselves? I know there's a lot for police out there, but I haven't heard a ton about sort of the medical folks and the fire folks.
Mississauga Fire actually referred us to Camila Fire, which is a neighboring city next to Mississauga. It's part of the same region. And we actually had an opportunity to meet with some of their team members to specifically support exactly what you're talking about, understanding the neurodiverse population. So understanding what are some of the things that you might see in an emergency situation. For example, communication shutdown, not responding to instructions. And then we talked about ways to approach those situations from a neurodiversity affirming lens. So it was a small group. I want to say maybe 20 participants, but it was a really good indication of the interest in being able to learn and potentially disseminate to their own teams. Because I think these were all fire safety leads that were going to bring this information back to their respective stations. And so we got a lot of questions about, one time I was providing support to an individual who didn't communicate, had a lot of difficulty evacuating the situation, and I did this. What's your feedback? So I think a lot of these firefighters and first responders have been in these situations and don't necessarily have the tools to be able to support. So having those discussions is really valuable. And the coordinator from Camila Fire, she mentioned, I forget the name of a bag. I think it's called the blue bag, and it's something from the States. And it's like a preparedness kit that they actually had, I guess they had gotten a few for their fire safety teams. And inside the kit has visuals, it has fidget toys, it has all these different tools that could potentially support an individual in a high stress situation. Obviously, not everything in there is, going to work, but it is demonstrating that bridge towards more understanding care in those situations that are going to be novel to an individual with neurodiversity.
Yeah, I think I told you folks at Ontaba, I'm also a captain in our local volunteer fire department here on Texada.
Yeah.
And I often think about, how teams might approach some of those calls and some of the fears and some of sort of the, the behaviors of concern that might come into play and sort of, I see a lot of training for police, and I don't see as much for fire and medical. So I think there's a real gap there for supports that are needed. Camila, I'd love to hear a bit about, I heard you, so there was a bit of a reference to you doing some of this individually with a client. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was thinking of that just now. It's been with a few clients. So for the Mississauga site, that's usually where we have the most clients. And I've started encouraging the administration that does the fire drills to try to do them when different clients are in the center. So before we used to do them when clients that we know, like, we're okay with the transitions, we will do it with them and just like that will be fine. But then I started saying, hey, how about we try it with this group of clients and see how they do with it. And the last time we did it, there was 3 clients in the center, and we thought that none of them would be following through with the instructions and that we would have need to really support them into the transition. But surprisingly, out of those 3, only 1 needed that support, and the other ones transitioned out to the meeting space. They were calm, then they got back to the room, even with the loud sounds that we were playing for the fire drill. And afterwards, we started talking more about creating a program to support that specific learner that was not able to follow through with the instructions due to it being very overwhelming and lots of noise, lots of different things happening. And so for that one, that happened, and we're trying to support him. On our Hamilton site, we also have another learner that he needs some support with transitions, and we've done a lot of fire drills with him, and we've started seeing more of understanding with the routine, and we're getting quicker responses and being more of a desensitization on this routine as well. And the other client that I've been working on it more directly is a home client that I've instructed the therapist on how to run the specific programs. We've been working on clothing safety. So what do you do if your clothing is on fire? How to treat burns and how to manage an emergency of a fire emergency. So if the alarm starts ringing, what do you do? Who do you call? How do you react? And so far, she's been doing great. The therapist has been recording some videos for me to see. The few times that I've gone there to supervise, the client just says, no, I don't want to do it now. So she's been showing me those videos, and the client's doing amazing understanding all of those steps. And she's been saying, oh, I need to call the fire department and say, this is my name, this is my address, please come here. And then the therapist asks her, okay, where do we go to the meeting point? And then she's able to say, oh, we'll go to this specific place. So just like teaching learners of various abilities and ages, it's really important. So those 3 learners, there's like a toddler, then a teenager, and middle school ages. It's all important to teach them at all ages and just try to have that preventative teaching phase.
What does fire drill desensitization look like? Tell me how you would desensitize someone who's...
So far, the desensitization part we've been doing with a teenager, and it's being more of a BST model. So we've been telling her how to do it, why it's important, and just modeling it to her. And she's been doing great with that part. We are yet to put it into a more practical instruction and practice.
Right on. And so you run a big agency that serves a lot of families, and I'm sure it does a lot of early intervention kind of work and whatnot. This sort of new knowledge for you of fire safety and all the skills involved in being safe, has that sort of changed how you look at some of your early intervention programming? I always find that, and again, I've never worked with early intervention. I've always worked with adults. And so I'm always sort of, biased and judgy towards, the BI folks, because I'm like, why didn't these folks learn these skills when they were 5, and why do I have to teach them now when they're 40? Now, when they're 40, I understand, because when they were 5, early intervention didn't exist. But when they're 20, and so I often think about some of these important skills that I think are missed out in those early years, and we focus on maybe skills that are maybe less important. And so, do you think about sort of incorporating more of that now into your early intervention sort of curriculum and teaching?
I do agree with you. I'll speak personally, when we're first receiving a learner, I would say previous to all of this fire safety experience, you start looking at communication styles and how they are socially, and can they feed themselves, and can they adjust themselves, and are there any behavior modification we need to focus on specifically for maladaptive behaviors, and our lens always goes there. And then what really opened my eyes, actually, outside of all of this, was a video that Emily and Esther showed us, which came from September26.org.
Yes.
The video's directly on there.
Yeah.
There's a specific video tied to that, and it shows the loss of an adult individual neurodivergent. That's neurodivergent, and his mother. And his mother did everything to try and save him. And that for me was, I can't watch that video without tearing up. I've watched it tons of times through this process of getting onto this fire safety understanding. But even on tab, I try not to look up at the screen because it just makes me super emotional. You're absolutely right. Not to say that fire safety was less important, but you sort of put it on the back burner. You also think there's other resources out there. Well, they're probably doing this at school. One of the things that I always thought is they're practicing fire drills at school as well. We're practicing it in the center as well, but they're practicing it at school. And then at the OMF POA symposium, I had some of the public officers, and Camila was there to support my claim here. But there was individuals that came up to us and said, we know plenty of schools that remove the individuals from the school prior to the fire drill going off. And that was a light bulb in my head saying, well, here I thought all these individuals are getting lots of practice multiple times a year at school when really they're not. So to answer your question, yes,
Yeah.
it's most definitely highlighted in our practice. Like Camila's given you some examples that we're putting it into practice, into clinical practice with our learners, because we realize that things like September 26th can happen so easily.
Yeah. And it's challenging trying to do that and repeat it. Like we have to do fire drills every month. So every month we have to put all of our learners into it. And sometimes they just don't want to go. And in a real life situation, that wouldn't be an option. So it's good that we're practicing it and slowly, okay, maybe you don't want to go to the meeting point. Let's get just outside at the front door, or let's just get in the hallway and just like slowly build up to that. And because we don't want to make it aversive for them. We want them to be able to follow through the instructions, because in the event of a real fire, then everything is going to be really overwhelming. So we want them to have that practice and knowledge of, okay, these are the steps that I need to do, being fluent with it and being able to follow through with that process.
Mm-hmm.
We actually created a desensitization guide that we presented. And we actually
had the smoke alarm.
Correct. Yeah. So we had just trying to teach that we can start it. You can actually get a smoke alarm and practice the skill out of context. So you're playing it at a low volume. You're pairing it with the picture of the smoke alarm. And then you're increasing the volume until you get to a point where you actually can play the smoke alarm at full volume. So we taught that. We demonstrated the guide at the symposiums. We shared it at Untaba too. So, and we actually have it on the link that was created by Mississauga Fire that they could use as well. So we're trying to provide practical guides that can actually be used.
One thing I was going to add also is, as Camila mentioned, like at our organization, we tried to prioritize doing fire drills once a month at our locations. And when we were talking to our administrative team, we were like, what are you observing? What are the areas that we need to support? We're trying to look at that skill from a behavior skills training perspective for our staff, but also for our clients. And we were noticing that sometimes it can be convenient to work on these skills with certain individuals who can follow the routine more readily. You know, we tried to emphasize, like, we need to focus on this with those individuals that have the most difficulty, because they're the ones that are likely being excluded from those opportunities outside of school. And most families are not practicing fire drills at home. So this is a great opportunity where we have a team who understands their individual needs, and we can focus on that. So we have really emphasized, like, let's do a rotation. Let's make sure that, you know, those clients that, you know, weren't engaging in maybe 5 of the 6 skills, that we're going to get them to, you know, maybe next time they're exhibiting 4 of the 6 skills. And let's work on that as a team, because, you know, it, like Lina said, it is unfortunately a skill that doesn't get practiced often, but is so important. And we also want our staff to feel confident in supporting our clients in those emergency situations, because they're also going to be heightened in an emergency situation as well. So yeah, it's something that it's definitely shaped the way that we see the importance of working on the skill. Yeah. And I think one thing that's also shaped us is we've seen the value of collaborating with the experts outside of the ABA field. So when we're looking at fire safety, we have seen the value of consultation with fire safety experts, because how can we teach a skill if we actually don't know what the best practice is? And that's gone beyond fire safety. When we're looking at dental hygiene, we want to consult with the experts on dental hygiene practices before we teach the skill, so that we can ensure it's best practice and it's what's up to date in what's happening in society.
Yeah, no, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, no, and you alluded to one point as well, that, you know, fire safety skills aren't practiced at home by anyone really, like a lot of the time. You know?
I'm guilty. I don't practice it with my kids.
And I think about, you know, I think the odds of the school burning down, you know, are relatively low compared to the odds of a home fire. You know, a house fire next door is so likely to set fire to your house, and so on.
Yeah.
You know, I think about it's wildfire season right now. You know, all the burn bans that just come up locally. That's become a big concern, certainly in this part of the world, and sort of the risks in terms of house fires. And so I think about a lot of the sort of the basic home safety skills that, you know, I wish folks had. How to use a fire extinguisher properly. I know a lot of children struggle with like to keep their bedroom door propped open at night, but we know from fire safety that children have an incredibly, well, anyone has something like a 40 to 50% higher chance of survival if they sleep with their bedroom door closed during a house fire. And so, I think thinking about these skills, especially for these kids who are already sort of overwhelmed by things, can make a big difference.
I think one other thing that was really helpful, again, from gaining that knowledge from Mississauga Fire, was understanding the local context. So when we had first met with them, they mentioned, in our region, one of the biggest causes of fire are cooking fires from oil. So that was really helpful to know that, okay, maybe we need to focus on fire safety in the kitchen because this is what's happening within our current context. And like you said in your area, right, it's the forest fire. So maybe that fire safety needs to be geared towards those situations where you're evacuating. So again, it goes back to the importance of that collaboration and understanding what information those professionals are able to provide from their lens.
And for those listening, do not spray water on your oil cooking fire. It will just spread the fire all over the kitchen.
Yeah.
You must smother. So what's next for you folks? What are some of the upcoming projects, future plans?
We actually, after Ontaba, we had Dr. Julie Kudis from Brock reach out to us. She had a personal interest because her husband actually worked for Mississauga Fire, or works for Mississauga Fire, and she is a BCBA herself. So she ended up reaching out to us a couple months ago, and she had been in talks with Dr. Andy Bondi, who had created a series of resources. It's called NIC. It is resources that professionals can use to help teach fire safety prevention, burn care. So his goal was to be able to get these resources out to communities to actually trial teaching. So it was really helpful for us to see, this is work that's being done outside of what we're doing, and how can we bring these resources that already exist to communities instead of having to reinvent the wheel, because these resources are great. There is even data collection systems on there. So it's really designed to help support teaching from an ABA lens, which is really neat. And then Lina and Camila, maybe you guys can share some of the upcoming projects that we have.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to Sarah's point is I had a fangirl moment with Dr. Andy Bondi. For those of you listening who don't know who he is, he's the founder of PECS. So it was a very exciting moment when we logged on and his face popped up. But I think that just highlights the importance of taking information and how valuable it can be to connect with others and how far the reach can be. So they're down in the States, and we discussed, let's bring that resources up to Canada, because we've clearly seen in our work with Mississauga Fire over the last couple of years that it's necessary and needed. So that was a really cool moment. So we're excited to see where that goes. We are continuing our partnership with Mississauga Fire. Like I said previously, we have some presentations coming up towards the end of the year that we're currently working on. I can't say too much because nothing's been set in stone, but we are working with them across multiple locations and at different times. Fire Safety Week is in October, at the beginning of October. So we're looking at starting some of those discussions again in October. Awesome. It seems like a fitting month to do that. So expanding the reach of who we're disseminating this information to is things on the horizon for us.
Yeah, and I think that we'll continue to run more fire drills with our learners and have a baseline of who needs more support, what areas they need more support with, and continue teaching those skills so that we can prevent in case of the real emergency, prevent them from feeling too overwhelmed and supporting them to be able to go through the motions and get to safety.
Really cool. Really cool. All right. Sarah, Camila, Lina, really cool chatting with you folks today about all the good work you're doing in fire safety. It's great to see that there's some behavior analysts finally getting involved with this stuff. Stoked to see what's coming up next. And Camila, you and I are going to connect some more. We'll talk more about the Dominican Republic, hopefully. This was awesome.
Yeah,
great learning
absolutely.
from you all.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ben. We appreciate it. We hope, just as a final note, we hope you guys listening to this can take a bit of our framework, We're happy to connect with you guys if you'd like to know a bit more of that framework, to take whatever you're passionate in outside of ABA and let those two worlds collide. So we're excited. We're continuing to work on some projects where that cross-sector collaboration is really important to us. So if anyone's interested in learning more about that, please reach out.
Awesome. We'll share some contact information as well in the show notes. That's awesome. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thanks,
Thank
Ben.
you.